The wreckage field stretches across dark water for miles, lit only by the searchlights of a recovery ship. Its crane sits idle, swinging gently with the swell. Debris bobs in scattered clusters, seat cushions, insulation panels, twisted metal, spread out like confetti across the waves. Night operations are underway, and somewhere beneath this floating graveyard, crews are hunting for one specific object. The obvious assumption seems unavoidable. They're searching for a black box, scanning for something dark, something that blends into black water and black wreckage. That assumption turns out to be wrong. The object they're hunting isn't black at all. It's painted the same blazing orange as a traffic cone. And if everyone supposedly knows this, why does almost nobody picture it correctly? Here's what's actually happening. The black box was never black. It's bright international orange, the same shade used on life rafts, hazard barrels, and offshore survival suits, chosen for exactly one reason: visibility against an environment built to swallow it. So why does a name this wrong survive for 70 years of aviation history, repeated in news broadcasts, films, and casual conversation, without anyone stopping to question it? Nobody is entirely sure where the name came from. Some say the earliest recorders came out of test crashes, scorched black by fire and smoke, and the nickname stuck to the wreckage rather than the object itself. Others say it's simply old engineering slang for any sealed instrument box, the kind of internal phrase that gets used once in a report and never lets go. Either way, the name became a liability rather than a description. Search teams, journalists, and the public have spent decades primed to picture the wrong color, scanning mental images of black wreckage for a black shape, when the actual object is built to be the loudest, most visible thing in the entire crash site. That mismatch between language and reality has shaped expectations for generations of viewers who think they understand exactly what they're looking for, right up until they see actual recovery footage and realize the object in frame looks nothing like what the name implies. Here's the part most people miss. There are actually two separate units doing this work, not one. The flight data recorder logs altitude, airspeed, engine performance, and control inputs, building a second-by-second mechanical record of everything the aircraft was doing in its final moments. The cockpit voice recorder captures the last conversations, alarms, and ambient sounds inside the cockpit, preserving the human side of the story, warnings called out, decisions made under pressure, the exact sequence of what crew members heard and said. Both are sealed inside shells of hardened steel or titanium, wrapped in layers of high-temperature insulation, and both are coated in that same aggressive orange. Every other component on a modern aircraft is engineered to disappear into the airframe: hidden wiring, integrated avionics, smooth fuselage panels designed to look seamless from the outside. This is the one part deliberately built to do the opposite, to scream for attention the moment anyone gets near it. That's the first hard twist. The single most protected, most expensive, most heavily engineered object on the plane is also the one explicitly designed to stand out visually. While the rest of the aircraft hides its complexity behind smooth panels and quiet systems, this box is built backward, tough on the inside, loud on the outside. Most engineering tries to disguise itself. This is engineering that's been told to advertise, and that inversion is rare enough in aviation design to be worth sitting with for a moment. And that contrast matters more once you understand the scale of what these recorders are actually up against. A crash over open ocean doesn't leave a tidy debris field in shallow, calm water near a coastline. Search zones can stretch across thousands of square miles in water deeper than human divers can physically reach, in total darkness, under currents strong enough to scatter wreckage for weeks after impact. Sonar sweeps that would cover a city in hours can take months to cover open ocean, inch by inch, because the seafloor itself is uncharted in many of these regions. Mountains, trenches, and ridges nobody has ever mapped in detail. Without a working locator signal and a color that fights against the void of open water, a recorder can vanish not for days, but for years, sometimes permanently. And when the box disappears, the investigation doesn't just slow down. It stalls completely, sometimes indefinitely, because without that data, there's often no other way to reconstruct what actually happened in the final minutes of flight. Eyewitnesses are gone. The aircraft can't speak for itself. The only surviving testimony is locked inside a box that nobody can find, sitting somewhere in a search area the size of a small country. So engineers built a second layer of defense beneath the paint, because color alone isn't enough once something sinks below the surface and disappears from line of sight entirely. The moment a recorder makes contact with water, an underwater locator beacon activates automatically, pulsing out a sonar signal on a frequency specifically chosen to cut through ocean noise and travel through water more efficiently than radio ever could. That beacon keeps transmitting for roughly 30 days before its battery dies, a deliberate window engineered around how long a serious international search effort typically takes to mobilize ships, deploy sonar equipment, and narrow down a debris field spread across open ocean. Meanwhile, the recorder itself is built to survive conditions that would destroy almost anything else on the aircraft. Impact forces measured in the thousands of Gs, fire exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, sustained for half an hour, crushing pressure at ocean depths beyond where most submarines can safely operate, and weeks of continuous saltwater immersion that would corrode through steel hulls many times its thickness. Engineers essentially built a tiny, indestructible witness designed to outlive the very aircraft carrying it. Here's where it gets stranger. Once a search team actually locates the wreckage, the obvious instinct is to grab the recorder immediately, get the data, start answering questions, end the uncertainty as fast as possible. That instinct is exactly wrong. Trained investigators don't rush to touch the box first. Protocol demands they document its exact position, photograph the surrounding wreckage field, and log precise coordinates before anyone lays a hand on it. Speed feels like the priority in a moment everyone is desperate for answers. It isn't. The box's exact location relative to the rest of the debris can reveal how the aircraft broke apart, in what sequence the pieces separated, and under what forces, information that's permanently lost the instant the scene gets disturbed. Move the recorder 6 feet before logging its position, and a piece of the puzzle is gone forever, replaced by nothing but memory and guesswork. The most critical seconds of an entire recovery operation are the ones where trained professionals deliberately slow everything down, resisting the urge that any untrained observer would feel immediately and acting almost against their own training in real-time crisis response. This entire system exists because of one stubborn historical problem. Crashes used to die with their witnesses, leaving investigators with nothing but twisted metal and guesswork. In the 1950s, an Australian researcher named David Warren was investigating a string of unexplained aircraft disasters with no survivors, no witnesses, and no instrumentation data to explain what had gone wrong. He had been called in to study one particular crash where the wreckage offered no clear cause and the cockpit crew had taken every answer down with them. His idea was simple, but radical for the time. What if the aircraft itself could testify after the fact, even when every human on board could not? Combine voice recordings with instrument data inside one sealed device, and even a total loss could explain itself to investigators afterward, turning silence into evidence and guesswork into certainty. The aviation industry didn't welcome this idea at all. Pilots and airlines pushed back hard, worried that constant recording amounted to surveillance, a permanent witness sitting in the cockpit, ready to be used against them after the fact, listening to every word and judgment call, every mistake, and every joke. Some pilots argued it would create a chilling effect in the cockpit, crews second-guessing themselves over routine decisions simply because they knew a tape was running. Adoption crawled for years despite Warren's working prototype proving the concept sound in testing, and despite early demonstrations showing exactly how much could be reconstructed from a single short recording. It took a continuing pattern of crashes with no explanation, investigators left guessing at root causes with nothing but scattered wreckage and speculation, families left without closure, regulators publicly admitting they had no reliable way to determine what had actually gone wrong, before authorities forced the issue and mandated recorders across commercial aviation by the mid-1960s. The box didn't get installed because it sounded like smart engineering. It got installed because the alternative was decade after decade of disasters nobody could ever fully explain, repeating the same unknown failures because nothing was ever learned from the last one. Now go back to the recovery footage that shows up after every major incident. A battered orange canister sitting on a table while cameras flash around it. Most viewers register it as evidence and move straight past it. But two details on that casing aren't decoration at all. The bold, reflective stripe pattern wrapped around the shell isn't styling. It's calibrated specifically for sonar return and camera visibility in murky, debris-filled water where ordinary surfaces vanish into the gloom within feet of a searchlight. And that small protruding nub near the casing, the one often mistaken by viewers for crash damage, is the locator beacon itself, sometimes still potentially pinging when the box finally comes out of the water after weeks submerged. That footage has been quietly showing a deliberately engineered survival and rescue system for years, while audiences read it as nothing more than battered scrap metal pulled from a disaster. None of this is flawless, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Locator beacons run on a finite battery and a limited broadcast range, and in deep ocean trenches or under strong currents, that 30-day signal can simply fail to reach anyone in time. Saltwater corrosion, sediment burial, and extreme depth have all defeated beacons before recovery teams arrived on scene, leaving recorders sitting on the ocean floor for years, sometimes permanently lost despite functioning exactly as designed. There are documented cases where search teams worked for weeks within range of a beacon, picking up faint pings, only to lose the signal entirely once the battery finally died before the wreckage could be pinpointed. Older aircraft fleets and certain operators have also lagged behind newer beacon standards, meaning the protection isn't uniform across every airline, every region, or every era of aircraft still in active service. Enforcement varies by jurisdiction too, and not every regulator inspects beacon batteries on the same schedule, which means a recorder's real-world readiness can depend on factors that have nothing to do with the design itself. That gap is exactly why modern regulations are pushing toward longer battery life, deeper rated beacons, and, more significantly, streaming flight data in real time, so investigators aren't entirely dependent on physically recovering one small object from the bottom of the ocean ever again. Which brings the whole story back to that wreckage field, lit by searchlights, crane idle on the deck. The object everyone there is hunting for was never the dull, hidden, black thing its nickname suggests. It's the most aggressively visible, most heavily engineered survival capsule on the entire aircraft, built to outlast fire, crushing pressure, and weeks underwater, then practically shout its location to anyone listening for it. The real story was never really about a box. It's about the decades-long fight to make one small object recoverable no matter how violently everything around it gets destroyed, and about how a single, misleading nickname has quietly shaped public imagination for 70 straight years. But if engineers have already built something this close to indestructible, here's the question worth sitting with. Why are investigators now talking about a future where they don't need to recover the box at all? Real-time data streaming, satellite-linked transmission, continuous broadcast from the moment something goes wrong, the physical recorder that just got decoded might already be on its way to becoming obsolete, replaced by a system that doesn't wait for a search ship to find anything in the dark, because the data was never really lost in the first place.